Okay, good morning and good afternoon, everybody, to all of you. And apologies for the delays and this session, but we'll get this going quickly so we can stay on schedule and not miss out. So my session is about running SharePoint 2010, which was originally scheduled, but due to the recent release of the beta release of 2013, so I've basically gone and installed and configured that. So just to sort of prove that it still obviously works in Windows Azure, which obviously it would. So hence I've changed the name of there. And so this session is just going to focus mainly on the capabilities and features of the Windows Azure, how to go about setting up the networks and machines, and we'll go into that. And then there's just basically a few slides to just cover off in the beginning, just to give a bit of a background. I live and work in London. I work with Point Beyond, a consultancy company, and that's my personal blog site and Twitter ID. So feel free to contact me after the session, or hopefully I can provide you any links or guidance. Generally, my ethos tends to be around that I do very little coding. Tend to sort of customize to the point where it kind of hurts, but more mainly it's all configuration within SharePoint and SQL Server technologies and elsewhere. Just a bit about me. SharePoint 2010 administrator. I've been in IT for 10 years. Worked with all those technologies that you see on that. Was awarded as a Microsoft Community Contributor last year for contributing on online forums with the SharePoint mainly and SQL Server question and answers. And a couple of degrees, mainly from City University, just focusing around the business systems and applications. Just a bit about Point Beyond, where we are. We're a global partner company based in the UK, up and down the country. We have the customers, and our focus tends to be around the business applications, although it does involve from strategy to installation, but focuses around getting the values. And we work with our partners such as K2, Lintex, and others. So okay, let's just get started, which is what we're here for. So basically, just to give you, Microsoft Cloud Computing, those are essentially three flavors, if you like, we have when we talk about cloud. Windows Azure, which is the main focus of this presentation, which basically covers everything, like if you think about in a box containing full of operating systems, networks, disks, storage. You've got the Office 365, which is the collaboration and productivity tools, having to not worry about anything on the back end, where you've got SharePoint Online, Office Web Apps, and other technologies with that. And obviously you've got Dynamic CRM Online, Windows Intune, which is to manage PCs remotely, and obviously Office Live. So it's just kind of give you background into the whole of the cloud space from Microsoft. So specifically within Windows Azure, it's basically an application platform for the public cloud. So anyone can just, company or individual can go up and sign up, and literally just allows you to use any operating system available, any language to develop your applications, or even database like MySQL, SQL Server, and any other development tools that you can use to develop your applications. The good thing is that when you build your web application, you can host it and run it on-premise and store it in the cloud and Windows Azure storage service, or you can run and store the whole thing within the Windows Azure space. And of course, the main idea behind is that if you create virtual machines, then you can create them from the images provided, which we'll take a look in real as to what those are. And of course, you can upload your own image, so you can migrate your whole machines to the cloud. Specifically in the last 3 months, I think back in June, Windows Azure has been around, obviously, I think for about a year or two, but specifically these three feature services have been available to us now for just over 2 months, which they are still in the preview mode. And specifically they are the fact that you can actually be able to create and manage your virtual machines, and also create virtual networks, as well as cross-network to your own organization's network. And obviously you can create websites and databases of that. And in terms of the websites, obviously there are other types of websites you can create on different platforms, which we'll take a look just briefly as to what services that we get on that. So just before we go into the demo sessions here, it's just to basically give you an idea. What I have here in terms of the evaluation purposes is I've got 3 servers set up as per the minimal requirements, if you like, for SharePoint. Yes, you could have everything on one server with a domain controller and the web server and the database, but obviously we've gone with a 3-server scenario, and that's roughly the spec that I've gone, which is just using those templates and the processor memory power and the options you get as well as to which ones you get. So all of that is within the Windows Azure. Nothing on the ground in terms of network. Even the network's up there as well. So we'll just take a look. So really, when we just go into the demo session, I mean, this is pretty much the common menu. Some of you might be familiar with that, but really just easy to use in terms of treat this as an application and almost assume that there is no knowledge about the networks or storage, and literally just try the whole thing as an application in terms of the process of creating virtual machines, networks, and storage. So let's just go straight in. So we'll just go to the Windows Azure website, which is windowsazure.com. And obviously this requires your Windows Live ID, so you can go for the free trial here. I'll go straight and log into my portal, and obviously prompting me to enter my Windows Live ID, which is chirag.patel@pointbeyond.com. The password. So once we log in, we'll get almost like a dashboard view, and in terms of the status of what's there. So just while that's loading up. So obviously that's my ID there, and while this is loading, we can just explore. So we have in the top menu bars here, in terms of what you can do, manage your account, support, community, and so forth, and some online help support. On the left-hand side, we got other menus, options, and services that we have available to us. So all items is going to just give you everything, as we can see. So if I go to the networks, so the way we've gone about doing this, treating in the 3 simple steps, is first of all, I've created the virtual network called PB Azure, and then secondly, I've gone and created storage, and then obviously within that the cloud services are created, and then be able to subsequently create virtual machines. So really just 3 points, if you like. So if I go into the virtual network settings there, by clicking there, then obviously that's my dashboard view I get. It tells me I've got 3 virtual machines linked to this network. I've got one network card there called front end. If I and obviously the cloud service that is going to be associated with that is the PBVM, and obviously local IP addresses, which is I'm just using in the Windows Azure network side of things. So each of those IP addresses, and then the subnet, which is what I've created. If I go to the configure area, then that's the address I gave. You can create as many subnets as you wish, and be able to then control your network topology, routing, IP address tables, and so on. Personally, I don't come from a network administration background, but for me, the challenge was that to be able to get up and running with an environment, and just to sort of prove how easy it is to use. So by all means, you can use your IP address and cross-network to your premises networks. There's no DNS servers configured, and obviously there's no local networks configured either. If you wanted to do that, this is the place you would come and do that. And obviously those are the IDs and the affinity group. Basically, this affinity group is more to do with the physical storage of servers spread across the globe, and kind of just keeps the load spread. So if we go back to here, Networks menu, so we come back to our home menu. If we go next to storage, so after the network was created, we've gone and then created our storage. And then if we go to dive in there furthermore, then obviously it tells us in terms of the 3 services that we have available to us, which is blobs, tables, and queues. Some of it's to do with SQL related. But here you can see at a quick glance that the primary region for the storage I've chosen is West Europe, and obviously secondary is North Europe. There are, I think, 7 regions altogether you can choose from around the world. And obviously, as you can see, it's a 3-month free trial. We can go and convert that into permanent if need be. So that's the storage side of things. And if we then go on to virtual machines, which is where we were set up, so we can see by just clicking on each of those areas, you just got the context sensitive areas of the machines that you can control. So specifically with DC01, which is our domain controller, and SP01, which is our SharePoint web server, and DB01, which is the obviously database server. So 3 separate machines have been created, linked to the location that we created from the storage, which is PB Azure Affinity, and each of the machines have got the identical DNS name as well. If I go to other options here in terms of images, obviously I haven't got any images on the disk images, but I can create one, and then obviously that will take some time to create, and then I can reuse that disk image for other machines that I create. In terms of the disks allocated to all the virtual machines, so I've got 6 disks. When you build a virtual machine, obviously you would get your operating system disks, and then I've gone and added furthermore data disks to each individual machines. And we'll look at one of the servers in detail as to what you get, but roughly, obviously, the replica and everything else is all the same. So if we go back to, I'm just going to show you in terms of new. So obviously, if we go and click on new, then obviously those are the things you create. Simple menu, no clutter. And if I go and say, let's create a virtual machine, either you can create quickly. If we say quickly create the virtual machine, give a name, as long as it exists, that's fine. The images you can choose is either the 2012 release candidate, or most probably that's going to come out next month, I think, in terms of the full version. And then we've got the that image there as well with SP2, SP1 release 2 with all the updates. And you got SQL 12. So obviously for database server, I chose the SQL Server 2012, and for the web server and the domain server, I chose just the ordinary servers there. Give an administrator password. Choose the size of the machine in terms of the processor and memory power. So we got about 5 options there: extra small to extra large. Typically, to 8 cores and 14 gig memory, which is obviously plenty for database server. And then obviously where you want to tie that to. So yes, you can tie it to your already storage that we've created, or you can choose one of those regions and basically tie your storage to that. The point here is that it doesn't really matter where you store your servers and information, as long as it's obviously you can get to it. So then we'll just go ahead and create that. If we choose the other option from gallery, then obviously gives you a nice user interface with 4 screenshots step by step, and obviously you can choose all the images available. You can see that there are other operating systems, and obviously you can choose your images if you had one, which I haven't obviously, so I can't show you on that. And then obviously from the disks as well. If we just said, we'll create that, go ahead and give a new name, And let's say we'll give this SPS India virtual machine name, administrator password, that, and we'll say, okay, let's choose medium server. Next. Do you want a standalone virtual machine? In this case, yes, we'll do that. We want to connect to the existing virtual machine. All that says basically is that if you want to connect to that, it's just basically spreading the workload to all the other servers. So we'll choose standalone, give a DNS name, SPS India. It's going to go ahead and check. It's taken already. So obviously we'll just say test. Okay. And then it says, do you want to use automatically generate account or use the one that you already have? And we'll just say, I'll use what I have. I'll link it to that. And also I'll use the virtual network that I have here as well. PB Azure. So then click next. And availability set. All this basically means is that if you want to create an availability set, so you can logically group your machines across the physical storage locations around the world. We're going to just say none for this exercise here, and then because only one subnet card available to us, so we'll just say okay, fine, we'll just pick that one, and okay that. So while that's happening, as you can see the status bar there, very friendly, I think, is from my point of view in terms of the usuals you get. Details, just basically saying that if it fails, obviously there's going to come back with a friendly error. But we'll leave that on the side now while that's creating. So we can say 10:29, that's when we started here, and then just see how long that takes. So we can just go and visit other areas of the site. So if I go back to virtual machines, and you can see here is provisioning that machine that we just wanted to create. And what we'll do at this stage is just go into one of the machines. We'll go to SPO1 and just connect to that. So you can see from here the options. You can either connect, restart, shut down, or attach disks, or even take it out. Very simple, not complicated. So we'll just go ahead and connect to that SPO1 machine that I already had created, which took around, I think, it typically takes about, I think, altogether 10 minutes to create the machine and then be able to attach the disks. So the whole thing just takes with less than a day to set up the 3 servers, domain controller, database, and web server. And while that's doing, this is where I say, demo gods be with me. Okay, well, the other machine we can see has been created, and obviously it's currently stopped, so we're just going to go ahead and we're just going to restart that. Go ahead and say, yeah, we're going to restart. And here, for some reason, okay, this is not what I was expecting. Just close that. I do have a copy of all that I was going to do is if I go in there and connect, it's just basically going to open up a from your RDP, terminal service connection to the server. So I've got one saved already. So I'll just go to my desktop. Where's it gone? If I go to the desktop. Okay, so here I've got 3 RDPs for each of the servers. So I'll just go and connect to that RDP. So the domain I've got set up here is PB Azure Demo, Windows Administrator. Okay, so it's just connected to that terminal server, and okay, fair enough. It's a beta product, so I think we can expect that time. So obviously we'll have central admin running. We'll just close that, and as you can see when we load in, the copy we get is the data center edition of Windows, and from here on it's just any other server that you get on with, basically, with the skill set that we have. Network administration or database. If I go in here, typically once the virtual machine was created, once we would log in, you'd obviously get 30 gigabyte capacity of a C drive and a temporary storage of D drive, and ideally obviously don't want to store anything on that. So obviously we go ahead and attach our disk from our Windows Azure dashboard, and then come into this server here and just basically format the disk and attach it to the server here, which is a standard disk administration activity. And then from here, it's just you got your server set up, and you just go ahead and install, and yeah, do what you think. So we'll just go and open up central administration. Okay, there we are. So as you can see, it's a new look for SharePoint 2013 preview. I have service applications set up here. So if I go in there, those are the ones that I have: app management, BDC, and others. So like I said earlier on in the presentation, I won't go into the great depths of the this SharePoint 2013, but it basically means that within a day you can have the whole demo instance up and running within the Windows Azure, and basically the world's your oyster, as I say, from there on. So I'll just come out from this session here, from this web server. So we just go back to our dashboard view. There we are. Okay. So that's obviously still creating our new server. It's created, but it's obviously trying to start up on that. So once that is done, it's obviously still been 6 minutes by the time we get to the starting point. So while that's happening, we can go to the other matrix side of things. So if we go to the actual web server itself, then I've got a little dashboard here that shows me how much I'm using in terms of the processor and the memories. So we can go in each of these terms here. So I can switch off, on and off those indicators. So we've got CPU data in and out, and read and write throughputs. We'll leave the CPU on. We'll leave everything on. And then you can set the times there. So really this demo environment for this event has been created since yesterday. So we'll have some stats there for the last 24 hours. But yeah, so typically, I mean, that just gives you a view, and then you can basically just react on that and say, okay, you know what, if we need more disks or more servers, more processor powers, then we can just go and configure within here and just say, change that from medium to large. Obviously that's going to shut down the machine and then come back up again. But this is where you would do that. And again, you can select your availability set. And if you add more network cards, then you can have the option of then attaching more network cards to the machine. The endpoints, typically default endpoints you can get, as you can imagine, is the remote desktop connections. So yes, we can add here the port 80 and then net the web traffic out of the web server onto the internet. Obviously that would be just HTTP, so not really secure. Wouldn't sort of advise doing that. But yeah, so this is where you would control your endpoints for your web servers or any other machines. So typically that's the view you would get for every virtual machine. And then here we have DB01, so same sort of view. And excuse me, if we look at the typical machine stats here, then it's basically getting things like the name of the machine, public virtual IP address. So we're using actually Windows Azure DNS entries and the internal IP address there. So we just go to the machine here, and hopefully that's created, I think. So machine has been restarted, which is good. So we can now just close this. We can dismiss those error those notifications, and we'll just go and connect to that new machine. So then obviously you get a prompt here to say either open or save the RDP. We'll just open it and connect to that. So this is the password that we entered back when we created our machine. And do that. So it's the local administrator account. Obviously there's no certificate installed, so that's why you get this prompt here. But we'll go ahead and say yes, that's fine. We know what we're doing on that. So here we are, just logging on first time on this machine that we just created about 10 minutes ago or so. And the bit I want to show you here is just to say, you know, typically just out of the box what you get. And but it's all configured with all the Windows updates up to June, that is. So obviously there will be more Windows updates from there on up to now. And essentially that's where you go with the Windows servers. Okay, there we are. So back to the screen there. If I just go to Explorer, then as you can see, it's obviously given me standard 30 gig capacity and the temporary storage of 134 gig there. That's our machine name, and then the standard thing here would be to just basically go and join it to the domain, and then obviously in most restart. So we won't do any of that, but that's just a standard server administration task that you would do when you would manage your servers. So there we are. So that's our machine that we just created, and yeah, I can't say any more than that. So we'll leave this machine now, which is SPS India machine. Log off that machine. Obviously, we're not going to have any stats just created, but point to prove that it's there. So when you get this on on-premise environments and end user organizations or somewhere else, usually then you have to sort of put in the business case, reserve the resource, which is the more important part, to make sure it's configured and set up to your environment. Here, I'm not saying that you can skip all those things altogether, but in terms of the speed of getting it up and running, it's much more faster, and with the it hardly requires any knowledge. And in terms of the documentation, it's very impressive. So I recommend to go and check that, which is on the windowsazure.com site, with all the helpful guides and everything else. So that's that. And if I go back to our main menu, so we now got 4 virtual machines in the cloud services, which is obviously services linked to that, which is the Affinity storage. So if I go and create, just go and look at the options that we get. So the cloud service here I've called is PVVM, Point Beyond Virtual Machine, and it just basically gives us some of the information there in terms of the input endpoints we have for 3 of the machines that we've attached to the network, and the location tied up together. If I go to monitor, then this will give us just information about, if you like, a different view of viewing all of our machines in one glass as opposed to individual machines. So that's the typical minimum max CPU percentage all the time. Instances, we got obviously those 3 machines linked to this instance. And then you've got certificates here, which we haven't got one, but this is where you would come and install your certificates so that you can safely connect to your machines and securely, which I've yet to try that on that. SQL databases, this used to be called SQL Azure. They've obviously renamed this now, so it's called SQL Database. And it's just a relational database service, no SQL server for you to manage. All you get to point is create a database, and then it's obviously in the storage in there. So this is where I think if you was to build any web applications and looking for a database to build, if you don't want to go and build a virtual machine with database server and SQL server on it and database installed, then you could just go and create a SQL database, and off you go with that. So the kind of options you get there is you specify the settings. We can probably do another one here. So we'll create a demo database and web edition or business edition. Those are the options you get. So in terms of the size of the database you want, obviously the more you take, then the storage is going to go up. We'll just go and say we'll create a web 1 GB database. It's plenty. Your SQL collation for any DBAs, this probably makes more sense to you. And go there. Obviously, SharePoint doesn't use this, the server default; it uses a specific one. But we won't choose any of this. We'll just stick to the defaults. Choose a server, or we'll just say new SQL database server. Go ahead, and then give a name. Test admin. Password. Again, those 10 selections there, so we'll just choose West Europe, which is where I'm best, and allow Windows Azure services to access the server, and then obviously it tells you exactly the firewall rules to configure and everything else. So just go ahead and do that. Now, I mean, obviously, what I wanted to sort of prove the point here is that I think once you've, the amount of time it took to do that, it's obviously less than a minute if you like. There we go. Got a 1 gig database demo created now. Then obviously, if you wanted to create a new server, it would have, which is what it's gone and done, or we could have linked it to a database server there. But yeah, basically, that's how you manage this database. So this is the IP, the firewall rules that's using now. This is where more knowledge is required in terms of somebody who manages the servers and networks, but literally just the options you get is no, yes, and then it's just do what you do, basically. So we won't go as far beyond that, but I just wanted to show there what you can do. And then obviously that's going ahead and doing something. So I'm just going to come back to my slides now. Actually, let's just try that then. Test demo. Test admin was the username. And then we'll just log on to that. There was an error. Okay. Something that I've done wrong. So anyways, we'll leave that and we'll just go back to the slides. So really, I mean, that was just a appreciate the time that we have, and kind of the world tour on that. But in terms of there's a lot to cover within that, to each of the settings of virtual machines and databases and so on. So I'll just kind of go through almost kind of a recap just to see what we've done. Now here you have different entries, just to say, got Chirac test here. This basically came about from a recent blog post that I wrote, which is on our Point Beyond website, which you can take a look at. It's got step-by-step instructions how to start from scratch and building your SharePoint to it. So I recommend to go and take a look at that. And most of this session is basically derived from that blog post, because it was a well-received blog post, and my thanks to Alpesh on this one, that he actually saw that and basically appreciated for me to come and do a session on this. So hence this is where the screenshots are coming from. But really what we did is, just to go through that, is we first went and created a virtual network and gave our address space and the subnet settings. We're only using just the one subnet, but the backend one is there for future use. And then once the virtual network was created, then obviously we went and created our storage, and by specifying the regions that we want to locate that to, and enable the replication around geographically. And then we had obviously those options that we selected for which virtual machine image we want, and gave a name, and obviously linked it to our storage account and the virtual network called Chirac test. So sometimes it helps to, I think, give a useful names, so we can distinguish between the names of networks and so on. So the only thing that I found is, I think, once there's no validation around the naming, it can be confusing if you call everything the same. And then obviously we had got our machines that were sort of running in there, and then we looked at the disks and configuration, and obviously the CPU monitoring, which is that screen there. So in terms of the pricing and licensing wise, it's obviously for what you're paying for. Essentially, this is just an estimate, so don't hold me to this at all. But basically, you have a kind of a calculator on the site, which is, I think, very useful to sort of calculate before you go ahead and build yourselves those machines. Obviously, for what you're paying, you're kind of covered for your Windows Server licenses. Then obviously the rest, you've got to license it in terms of if you want to put SQL Server on it, and so on. So here is just an example of a typical size of a virtual machine that's got 2 core and 3.5 gig memory, and there's 3 machines of those. So typically that would be around £209 per month. That's the Great British Pound. And then you have the Linux machines, obviously settings in there. You can do those pricing. We chose the storage here, which is about just over a terabyte, and that's £86 per month, for obviously divided between all 3 servers. And the bandwidth in terms of what you're paying for. For inbound traffic, you pretty much not paying for anything, but obviously any traffic going out is where your cost will consume, as well as the running of the machines. Even though when they're switched off, obviously they're still consuming resource, so you're kind of paying for that as well. But in total, that kind of just gives an idea that for 3 machines, decent spec, and you're kind of almost paying £306 or so per month. And kind of when you compare that cost against having the usual scenarios of having servers in house, having them supported, the electricity and all those things, then it can give you a fair idea in terms of what you're getting for your money. So really, just kind of, if we look in conclusion, in terms of some main summary points. So I think from this session and from my especially in the last month, my time that I've spent on the Windows Azure, I've just found out I don't have to really deal with any of the hardware resource and routers and all that stuff. And but like I said, my background is from a database administration and SharePoint. And so when it comes to setting this up as a demo instance and all that, I don't really need to know any specialist knowledge about that. Main thing is obviously infrastructure as a service, so you're just going to be paying for what you really use. And the dashboard and how to go about doing those things was very straightforward. Even for a novice, you could just get up and running. And main thing is to save the time and effort of other people as well, especially when you're relying on them to set up things for you, like DNS and servers and configuring all those things. And yeah, so you can host a number of instances for different environments, for different customers, and so on. That's really about it, really. And those are my contact details. And obviously, feel free to contact me. And obviously, we're going to be doing more work around Windows Azure and best practice installs and so forth. But it's really just to sort of make you aware of what you've seen today is obviously like a developer best practice in terms of setting up those servers with those IP addresses and everything else, including the installation of SharePoint, which obviously all the services are running under, let's say, one account. But in terms of to try and cover this session, it was obviously important just to say that the possibilities are unlimited, and go for it and enjoy your adventure for Windows Azure. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thanks, Chirag. I must say that was fantastic, and yes, it was good to have read your blog post and take it from there, and I'm glad you could make it.
Sure, no, thank you.
Yeah, after all the trouble that you had with that ID, yeah, I'm glad I had a backup plan, and this is because I had this request for IDs by a few other people as well, so I knew this could be a deterrent. So
yeah.
no, I'm glad, and it was a great session. Thank you very much. And
no,